Sorry. Call this meeting to order, Monday, November 13th, 6 p.m. Cherry, do roll call, please.
Here.
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 Here. All right, this is an open meeting and it has been posted. Please join me for a moment of silence. All right, thank you. Please join me for Pledge of Allegiance. Moving on to B, student presentations, student records, and confidentiality.
Thank you. This evening we have Brian Waterman, one of our legal counsel, here with us tonight. Just put a short presentation together. In recent weeks, months, we've had some questions as to what can be shared, what can't be shared when we say we're referencing policy or statute. We just want to take a moment to explain and answer some questions around these records, these rules that we must follow, and answer any questions of the board tonight. So we have a short presentation for you. It's up on the screen, just entitled Student Records and Confidentiality. Tom, if you could move it forward, please. We have 4 policies in the district that I guess are pertinent to this time. The first is policy 8330, student records. The next one is 8350, confidentiality. The next one is 8410, crisis intervention. And the final one is 8310, public records. So these are the policies that generally govern what we do, what we can do, what we can't do as it pertains to either an event in the school or a record that is tied directly to a student. Could you advance, please, Tom? There are a few laws, and I'll have Brian run through those quickly for us.
Sure. So we've got laws at both the state and federal level that address pupil or student records. And we'll get to the next slide in a second, but there's a number of different types of records that fall under pupil or student records. But the 2 laws echo each other for the most part, although Wisconsin's law is a little bit more detailed. There's also a good amount of guidance that goes along with the regulatory agencies that enforce both these laws. So we have, while we take each case on a case-by-case basis, there's a good amount of material to help us interpret these 2 laws.
And so there's a handful of records that we must maintain confidentiality around. We'll talk through some scenarios in a moment, but any academic record, including student test scores and transcripts, any behavioral records, including disciplinary records, suspension records, expulsion records, attendance records, student support records, so IEPs, individualized education plans, 504 accommodation plans, individualized language plans, and student health plans. And then student health care records, including records containing a diagnoses, opinions, and judgments made by a healthcare provider. And if you could advance, Tom. And so there's some important takeaways that we, as a school district, must adhere to. We may disclose personally identifiable information from a student record only under 3 circumstances: with written consent from the parent, guardian, or an adult student, with receipt of a court order, and by the authority of statute. Under FERPA, disclosure means to permit access to or the release, transfer, or otherwise communication of personally identifiable information containing in education records to any party by any means, including oral, written, or electronic. Student records are generally exempt from Wisconsin public records law requirements, and FERPA violations could result in an investigation by the Department of Ed and the potential loss of funding to the district. So what does all of this mean for us as far as the school district goes? I have 4 kids in the district, so like my son's academic records are really only entitled to be shared with me and my wife, and then educators in the system that would be working directly with my children. My children got in trouble, we would know about it, the principal would know about it, the teacher would know about it. But beyond that, I can't share those. Those records could not be disclosed by the school district to anybody else. So if we were to have a major event happen in the school district, we would do the investigation internally. But any record tied to that individual student then would be a protected record. It would be something that we couldn't share the specifics of. We can talk more broadly to the community about what we would do to keep the school safe, for instance, or give a general update to perhaps a school community about something that happened at school. But if that something was so specific that it was very easy to identify the student, we'd have to be very cautious as to what we would then release. So Brian and I are available for any questions if you have them.
If I could add, Joe, I think one of the main takeaways here from this last slide as well is that we're not, when we talk about records, we're not just talking about records, we're talking about information as well. So, you know, when they have that broad definition of what disclosure means, that includes communication of information that would be contained in records or otherwise pertaining to that student and their academic history, their disciplinary history, all those things. But verbal communication would fall under FERPA and its counterpart at the state level as well.
Guess I just want to ask questions that have been asked to me by the community and that are floating around is, how can we better communicate with the community that their children are safe?
Yeah.
Like, what have we as a district done to ensure that their children are safe?
So that's a great question, and I'd say that in the districts I work with, there's always a balancing, right, between interest when it comes to a student event, for instance, that has an impact on the broader school community. And so when we're evaluating, whether it's with administrators or board members, what can and can't be disclosed, what should or shouldn't be disclosed, I think you've got to balance the interest of parents, right, because we look at parental rights and information needed to make informed decisions about their children's safety and their education. We hold that to be pretty paramount, as well as the public right to know certain information so that they can, there's transparency in their public institutions, so they can make decisions in that regard as well. There's also then, you know, there's the interest of board members that comes into play. You want to be responsive to your constituents. You want to be able to provide them information, not be caught off guard. And then there's student interests as well that we have to balance, and some of those things that Joe just talked about. Laws that say that, you know, we have to take into account students' rights under FERPA and the statutes. You know, I think another thing that, and we've talked about this, I've talked about this with the board in the past, another thing that we have to keep in mind is when we're talking about what information the board has or the board can communicate to the public, we also have to think about the board's role or potential role as the ultimate decision maker. And a good example is when you have, let's say you have an incident involving students at school, perhaps one of the students or both of the students are referred for expulsion, and the board is the ultimate decision maker with regard to that expulsion. If too much information is provided to the board or provided to the public that the board has access to through the district, you know, it subjects the board to claims of bias or prejudgment that would taint the process. And so whether it's the district's administration providing information to the board or the district's administration providing information to the public that the board would have access to, we really have to balance those interests to make sure that all parties are fairly represented, but no party's rights are infringed upon.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'll make a statement maybe. It's when social media gets involved and the information is just plain wrong, and we obviously can't say anything about it. That's the hardest part, when you hear wrong things after wrong thing and we can't even make a statement.
Sure. I'd say how most districts handle that, and most boards handle that, is a number of things. You asked before, Dale, about what are some of the things that we can provide information to the public. Talking about policy and procedure, those are important things, right? Our disciplinary policies, our procedures for doing that. We have those as guidelines for administration and for the district to follow, and I think it's important to let the public know that those policies are being followed. That's number one. While we can't get into details regarding specific students and the level of discipline or how we've handled those students because of student records issues, we can talk about general safety measures that the district takes so that you know, the public understands that action is being taken, and we can reassure them that the school community is safe.
And just for the board's interest, when we do deal with situations of threats, violence, things of that nature, we are always in consultation with law enforcement, be it the Mukwonago Police Department, the Sheriff's Department, and any of the other municipalities that we work with. We bring them in as partners when we do threat assessments for students, when we need to have a connection with the home to make sure that, for instance, if the child indicates that they have access to weapons, we work with the law enforcement to make sure that we know that things are safer, and if they're not safe, we escalate that threat assessment and potentially employ harsher discipline up to and including exclusionary discipline so that we can keep that school environment safe. So we do work with our law enforcement partners. We don't make these decisions entirely on our own.
And I can add too that, you know, having seen this scenario play out in a lot of districts where, especially, you know, in the last 10 years or so, where there's a lot of events that call for law enforcement to get involved. One of the reasons that we hold back on providing a lot of detail regarding law enforcement is because we've had law enforcement officials come to districts and say, look, if you provide too much information about our responses or your staff's responses to an emergency situation, that can jeopardize the officers. Typically, in my experience, law enforcement has a specific plan that they've identified with responding to safety incidents at each individual school. They know the layout, they have tactics for entering the building, for searching, all those things. They have a protocol, staff has a protocol in the same regard. And by providing too much information to the public beyond, you know, the general safety measures that are being taken, sometimes that can put law enforcement or even our staff and students in a precarious position.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Moving on to citizens' comments.
Drew Szymanski? Did I say that right, Drew? You're up. You want to grab the microphone? You have 3 minutes, and I'll give you a 30-second warning, okay?
Sure, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for your time. The reason I'm here this evening is I'm here to appeal my denial to get my children's bus stop moved. Little backstory. It got moved this year as there was a request per the transportation office that there were supposed to be other children at the stop. This hasn't been the case for the last couple of years. In the years past, my children have been able to get on the bus at their home. So called the bus company. They said, you know, this was in the, August. You know, I asked for this request. They said, call back in a month, call back in 3 weeks. There was still nobody there per the request. Said, okay, we'll take another look at it. You know, give it another week. I've been in good communication with Dawson Transport Corp. There have been no other children at my kids' bus stops the entire school year. I live in Big Bend. My children go to St. Joe's. It's just been them. At this point, I'm requesting the board that the original bus stop that my kids have been going to for the past 3 years be moved from the corner of Marietta and Loretto back to my driveway based on this is what they're used to. You know, there's no sidewalks there. It's 6:45 in the morning. People are leaving for work. I would definitely feel safer if my kids just got on the bus in their driveway. I know my wife would, where they're getting on the bus right now. They're to walk down to the end, 2 houses down. It's probably 500 feet and around the corner. She doesn't feel safe that she can't see her children get on the bus in the morning because it's blocked by a house. And you could argue we'll just walk out there. We also have a toddler that's sleeping. So there's no real reason to wake her up if needed. So if you could please consider allowing Dawson Transport Corp to move the bus stop back to my driveway, I would really appreciate it. Any questions for me?
During citizens' comments, we just listen to what you have to say.
And you know, a couple more facts. You know, my 2 children are the only people in that whole bus stop that are there Monday through Friday. There's some part-time kids, but other than that, it's just them. I really don't see why there's not.
30 seconds, Drew.
Yep, I really don't see why there's not a good reason to move it back to the driveway, personally. You know, conveniency, safety, a couple key features, that's all. Thanks for your time, everybody.
Thank you.
David Schultz? I'll give you a 30-second warning, okay, Dave?
Thank you for your time. So 21%, that is the percentage of the Gen Z that identify as somewhere on the rainbow. And for those of you scoring at home, that means LGBTQIA, 21% of Gen Z. That translates out to 20 million Americans that identify as on the rainbow and 1.6 million Americans that identify as transgender. These are not small numbers, and they continue to increase. Transgender rights are the issue of our time, just like reproductive rights, gay rights, women's rights, civil rights, voting rights, the list goes on and on. The arguments are always the same. There's appeal to the authority, there's appeal to our experts, there's appeal to our religious leaders in texts, but the argument's the same and they always fall flat. And while the moral or the arc of the moral universe is long, it does bend toward justice, which is now why we see 75% of Americans that support gay marriage. And that number was not the same when I fought for gay rights back in the late 80s and early 90s. $166 million. That's what it cost the Rockford Public Schools when they had a lawsuit, a discrimination lawsuit. And if you read the court records, it was very clear what the school board was doing, and rather than throw themselves at the mercy of the court, they decided to fight it. And that $166 million does not even include all of the costs, the knock-on costs of just to fix everything there. 20 states plus the Washington, D.C. That is the number of attorneys general that have signed on to an amicus brief that has been presented on to the district court, or excuse me, the circuit court. That is, the conclusion is that we need to affirm the decision that was made at the district court level. There's 21 attorneys general on that. You also have two similar cases that dealt with transgender bathroom policies that were decided by the Seventh Circuit. Precedence is very important to this circuit, and keep in mind this is a conservative court. This is the Posner court. So taking a look at everything, you need to drop the lawsuit. You need to come up with a policy that is inclusive for all kids, because there is a long uphill battle and it's going to cost us a lot of money. And while you're at it, you probably ought to reinstate the student members, because that did not sit well for a lot of people out here. So
30 seconds, Dave.
that's why I'm here, and thank you for listening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, next is consent agenda. Does anybody have any comments or questions? Hearing none, we got the approval of the school board meeting minutes of October 23rd, 2023. Moving on to, we don't have any recognitions, so we'll move on to finance and facility topics.
Yes, please. So this evening, we thought we would come forward and present a little bit of start with the memo, please, Tom. Come forward and present a little bit about our work this year in addressing school safety. So Andy, if you wouldn't mind coming up to the microphone. We've been very fortunate. Andy and Tom have done an outstanding job of positioning us to handle any issues that we may face in the school district, from the physical building to the procedures that we would use if an emergency should arise. As we work on this, we're committing to an annual review of our safety procedures. So making sure that the things that we have in place in the district continue to evolve to meet the needs that we see on the horizon in the realm of safety. We are working off of a template, and Tom, I'd ask you to go over to that template from the Wisconsin Department of Justice. So Andy works very closely with the DOJ in submitting our safety plans and making sure that those are reviewed. Some of the feedback that we've received has been that we should have an overarching district plan. Our plans have been school-based up until this point, so we're going to be in the process of developing an overarching district safety plan that is flexible enough to meet the unique needs and layouts of each of our schools, but that is something where the common language is spoken and the common procedures are used across our school system. So be it Eagleville, our smallest building, to MHS, our largest building, we're going to be in the process of working on this. We'll be collaborating with the law enforcement agencies, our first responders. We'll be bringing our school administrators in, and then through various aspects of this plan, Christine and the student services team will be pulling groups together to look at how we respond to tragedy, how we get kids back on their feet, what supports we put in place in school. So This will be several months in length, but as we go forward with this plan, with aligning our strategies across the schools, ensuring that our drills are being conducted the way they should be conducted, we will provide periodic updates to you as a board, but this is one of the areas that we are looking to make some adjustments to. Tom, if you wouldn't mind going back to the memo, please. Yes. We're also looking at a standard response protocol. There is an organization, I love you guys. There's a lot of familiarity with this process in Waukesha County. The reason why I have the resource link there is all you have to do is Google it and you can find it. It's essentially the blueprint for how we would respond should issues come up, be it a weather-related issue, medical issue in the school, a fire event at the school, or something more in the realm of crisis in the building. So we're working on reviewing that. I put a link in the agenda for people to take a look at. But the nice thing about this is it really follows that KISS principle, to keep it simple, because what we need to be able to do is accommodate for whatever type of staff member we have in the building, be it a substitute teacher who's brand new to our district, all the way up to somebody who's been here for 30 years, somebody who's got the institutional knowledge that Andy has. This type of response really helps us in those environments. The other area that we're working on, and I'll let Andy talk a little bit more about it, is the CRG mapping of our school buildings to assist with the law enforcement presence. So at this time, I'll pass it to Andy.
All right, so we have applied for a grant through the DOJ, and they've fully funded that. We will pay up front, they'll pay us back. In the end, we will have mapping for all our schools. It'll be more or less a topical graph of our satellite view of our schools, but it'll have all of our floor plans in that. Yes, sir.
Andy, what does CRG actually stand for?
It's for the company that's doing it.
Gotcha. Okay, thank
Critical
you.
Response Group.
Thank you.
So they are going to lay these out, and then they'll be in a checkered form, kind of like a bingo sheet where it's letters on one side, numbers on the other. What this does is it's the same as what the military uses for their pre-incident plans to go into any type of area. This will be set up in the sense that law enforcement, first responders will have access to this using a program called Rapid SOS. And by that, as they're responding, they won't have to be fumbling through sheets of paper to know what this building looks like. If it's a police officer from the city of Delafield coming all the way down to Mukwonago, they'll be able to pull us up on their phone and be able to navigate through our buildings. So it's well worth technology that's being put out there in front of law enforcement should we need it.
So we'll be coming forward over the next several months with kind of the high-level stuff. We'll talk about it at the committee. We're not in a position to make any recommendations for approval at this time, but we did want to let you know that this is part of our active work. It's been something that we've been talking about since July, August, when I first came on board, and it's something that we'll keep on our radar in the years ahead. So we are here to answer any questions if you have any.
Carolyn?
For the safety plan, you said you're coordinating with different law enforcement. Is like everyone, like all the different law enforcements that represent our district, all involved in that? Is it Waukesha County, Big Bend?
When we start bringing the groupings in, we are going to invite all of the law enforcement agencies in to be part of that discussion, yes.
Cool.
And we want to ensure that they have our terminology. It is one of the unique things when you're across several different jurisdictions, making sure that everybody knows this is what their plan is, this is how they're going to operate, this is the language that they use. It also is very beneficial for us when we have, for instance, traveling staff that may only be in one building 1 day a week. It's very important for them to know that the same language at MHS is the same language at Parkview and same language at Eagleville.
Any other questions? Thank you. I just want to say we're lucky to have Andy. His background, he's also our assistant fire chief. So with his training, I think we're lucky to have him head this up. Thank you.
You're welcome. He's a good farmer, too.
All right, then the next thing on the agenda was our health clinic and creating reciprocity with Muskego. So Muskego is having discussions on their end to open up the reciprocity where our employees can use theirs, vice versa. I can't see a reason why we wouldn't try this at a minimum, then reevaluate it every few months to kind of see where the numbers are at, how are things going, is it working for both parties as intended? So I guess I'm just kind of here to talk and ask, are we good moving in this direction? And if so, then we'd like to start this on Monday, December 5th.
I like it.
I'm in.
Okay, thank you. All right, then the next thing that I had then was just a quick update on our investment results. So per one of our board policies, I bring back updates to the relevant committee, which would be the committee of the whole. So we have about $5.5 million invested in our Fund 73 OPEB, Other Post-Employment Benefits Trust Fund. You can see the rate of return has steadily creeped up over the last 15 months or so, but those are the rates of return. So that's just for your information, no actions needed, but we do this about every 3 or 4 months to let you know where things are at. Okay, any questions there?
Nope.
All right, then the next thing was, then we had meal reimbursements to traveling staff members. So for traveling staff here, and I'll pull it up here real quickly so we can be on the same page. We set limits on how much money a staff member can spend when they are out traveling at a conference. Currently, it's $8 for breakfast, $9 for lunch, and $18 for dinner. Sometime last week, I had my 8-year anniversary here with the district, and I know during my time, we have not revisited that, and I just think it's time to at least consider that. So,
Where can you get a meal for that?
well, that's why we're talking about it, I guess. You know,
Dollar store's open now.
Congratulations on 8 years, Tom.
I didn't want to celebrate too early, you know, and you never know.
You're only as good as your last paycheck.
So I guess I am proposing that we move, you know, and looking at other values in the district. I'm not trying to be too lenient, but I also want to do what's right for our people. So I was proposing that we move our values to 13 for breakfast, 15 for lunch, and 26 for dinner. It seems to be kind of where things are at. So between now and next board meeting, if you have any questions or concerns or suggestions, I'm open to it. If not, maybe you'll make a move in 2 weeks. Any questions there?
Nope.
Okay. Next thing I wanted to go through then was our just trying to stay ahead of things right now. So at the end of next month, then, you know, our folks will start to get their tax bills that come their way. So we set our tax levy last month. We do it every October. And I just want to walk through here, like, some of the information. So as questions will come, all of our municipalities are ultimately in one school district, but 11 different boats. So I just kind of want to talk about those 11 municipalities. You can see we have them in Waukesha County, and a small piece of our district is in Walworth County. You can see at the bottom of the 22-23 equalized value column. So we're talking about basically fair market rates of property values. Last year was 4.7 billion. This year, 5.2 billion. That's a 10% increase, just over. So property values increased $481 million. Some of that is going to be appreciation, you know, paper gains. The value of your house just goes up over time. Some of that's net new construction. So new neighborhoods, new businesses, as they go up, there's more hands on deck to help pay that property tax bill. Just looking at the percent changes that we have then, so, you know, the tax bill is going to get spread out proportionately based on how much property values, you know, the town of Eagle last year had 7.6% of the equalized property value. This year, 8.1. So they therefore get 8.1% of the overall tax levy that we set. So it just gets distributed out there. Okay, so if you look at the year-to-year change, and this is rounded to 1/10%, so like the city of Muskego, I think there's like 7 properties that are technically in the city of Muskego but fall inside of our district boundaries, but it doesn't even register here, as we'd have to get some more decimal points going. You can see the net changes. Anybody in red decreased their share of the property. So 2 things I would note there. Village of Mukwonago last year, 22.6 of the property value. This year, 23.7. So they're up 1.2% of the value in the district. And then the Village of Vernon decreased by 1.4%. So that starts to, when you look at how the gross change in taxes, as we increase taxes, the gross tax levy, and again, we focus on the net tax levy, and I'll finish with that comment at the end of this, but the gross tax levy went up 1.4 million, knowing that the bottom line on average for our community would decrease. So again, you can see those who have, which communities are gonna see a smaller tax bill than last year and those that are bigger. All right. So as we start with the gross change in taxes, there's the increase of 1.4 million. We know that the school levy tax credit is going to be somewhere in the range of 1.7 or 1.8 million. So although taxes went up 1.4, we know those are going to be offset and then some by the school levy tax credit. Okay? So you can see this is that column I have on the far right at this time is my anticipated I don't know those amounts. Those are going to come from the Department of Revenue. So, you know, if you take a look at the Village of Vernon, their taxes are going to go down as a whole by $71,000. And then furthermore, their taxes are going to get offset an additional $723,000. So, Village of Vernon, that's a winner this year. Their taxes are going to go down. The Village of Mukwonago, where there has been, you know, new neighborhoods being built, the taxes went up $699,000, will be offset by $326,000 for the additional school levy tax credit. So then we therefore look at the net change to the tax bill in terms of dollars. We anticipate that taxes are going to go down $356,000 throughout the district. In some communities there's a reduction, in some communities there's an increase. It really depends on how much, you know, property value relative to the others does that community have, and how much are they getting through the school levy tax credit. We don't control that part of who gets the school levy tax credit, okay? So at the end of it, you can see the percentage change. There's a huge variability, you know, from the town of Ottawa's taxes are down 14%, and the Village of Mukwonago up 5.3%. Now, I would say that the net new construction that occurs in the Village of Mukwonago, that doesn't mean that everyone's tax bill for K-12 is going up 5.3. It means once net new construction offsets that, it will shrink. But throughout the district, we aim for a negative 0.2% reduction in overall taxes. Here I'm estimating and conservatively estimating that will be down about 1.2%. So district-wide, there it is. But community by community, it just looks different. So I just kind of want to bring that up as you all represent various parts of the school district. You know, it's worth talking about here, okay? So just to summarize this then, so we target a reduction in the net tax bill to be minus 0.2% on average. That doesn't mean everybody's going to have that, but throughout the district, and as I just showed on the previous slide, it'll be about minus 1.2%. Okay? Each municipality's tax situation is different due to year-to-year changes in municipal-wide property values and the distribution of the school levy tax credit. Do you have any questions that I can answer or clarify anything?
If you average it out, would it come out to that 2%? You took that last slide and you...
Yes, yeah, I mean, so in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see there's a minus 1.2%. So basically, that's the net, the net effect on if all of our taxpayers belong to one household, the taxes would be down. Okay. Town of I'm with you, Cherry. That's mine too. So I'm with you. Okay.
Is the town of Vernon no longer? Is it now village?
Yep.
Oh, it's a village now? Okay, good.
All right, then the last one then we have is the transportation concern that we heard about earlier. I apologize, give me 1 second. Here we go. So this particular, I got the bus route pulled up here. The bus route, this is an alpha route, so it picks up just St. Joe's Catholic Church and Christ Lutheran. It's an elementary route that runs early because those schools start early. But up to the upper left-hand corner, this is County Road L, or Milwaukee Avenue, as they call it in Big Bend. The bus turns in, turns to the left here, stops where that star is to pick up the 2 students in question, moves about the neighborhood here. There's another stop that takes place down here, and then back out. So there are a number of students that are assigned to that bus stop. The bus company never knows when those students will or will not ride, but obviously they do have that right to use the bus when they want to. This gentleman lives here, that family lives here in that green triangle, and they're asking for the bus stop to get moved. So as a standard operating procedure, if there's no safety issue, I let Dousman Transport dictate that. If there's a true safety concern, I'll make the appropriate change, and I don't see one here. It's before you now, so have fun with it, guys. I know you enjoy these ones.
How many other kids are assigned to that bus?
That I don't know, but I can bring that to you, Carolyn, on next meeting, okay? I'll find that out for you. I should have had that. I apologize.
Tom, what was Dousman's reason for not moving it?
Just the assigning of other students to that route.
Okay.
You know, when they go through that, every year, every bus stop, every route gets evaluated, who's going to be assigned. You know, St. Joe's Catholic Church isn't that far. It's just, you know, off the upper left-hand side of the screen, so it's almost walkable, but we don't have kids cross County Road L.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
So I grew up right here, and I walk to St. Joe's every day, just saying. Okay. In the snow.
Was it
In the
uphill?
snow.
Yeah.
Uphill? Is it uphill too?
Wearing ice skates.
Any other questions for Tom? All right. Moving on to policy. I should say policies.
All right, next time I'll invite an auctioneer if the list ever gets this long. But yeah, we have a number of them in front of you tonight. The first item in there, or the first document that you have in front of you, is just a brief summary of what is in front of you this evening. So since these are just being presented tonight, I'm happy to answer questions on them. But I'll go through the summary document. The first policy, the electoral process, it's been updated to clarify the requirements of a qualified elector to file the declaration of candidacy, as well as the requirements for incumbents seeking re-election. The legal citations have also been updated on that policy. Conflict of interest, 0144.3. Language has been added to the policy clarifying that board members may not be a paid employee of the district. And it's also added the statutory language that provides an opportunity for board members to serve as unpaid volunteers. The appropriate legal citations have also been added. The 0164, it's a new meetings policy. This is being done out of convenience. It just lumps all of our meetings policies into one. 142131414121 criminal history record check and self-reporting requirements. It's just updating the policy that the self-reporting language has been revised for greater clarity. This is a recommended policy, but not required. Number of the policies coming forward tonight need to be approved by the board. And what they're doing is replacing Stephen Williams, our former HR director, with Rachel's name, and then Christine with Ben Casau as compliance officers. So you'll see that under the non-discrimination and equal employment. The family and medical leave were updated with the same non-discrimination language as has the employee anti-harassment, non-discrimination and equal access to education, non-discrimination on the basis of sex and education programs. And so those are the ones that are required. We need board approval. It's not a technical correction to add those names because you're designating those individuals to be the compliance officers. Under 2451, program or curricular modifications, the language has been revised to reflect the option included in statute for a designee of the board to deal with such requests. Districts where this process has been delegated to a designee of the board should adopt the revision. 3139, 4139, staff discipline, has been updated to include the issuance of a Garrity warning in appropriate circumstances. I know that there was a question that was going to come tonight, so I have a template that would be used. I'll pass this around to the board members, and if one could circulate down to Rachel for what a Garrity warning would look like. We can come back to that as it's going around. Open enrollment and attendance are being updated to talk about chronic truancy. If we have a student who is truant to the district and the process we need to do in order to send them back to their home district. It's important that we get this one on the books before December because we set the open enrollment seats in January. Student anti-harassment is being updated for the Garrity warning piece, but also to be in compliant with adding Rachel and Ben to the policy language. Student use or possession of intoxicants, drugs, or paraphernalia. This talks about the scope of drug and their derivatives in school. We're able to prohibit substances, obviously. I know that there was a question that came in today around essential oils, and that'll be something that we can discuss as that is a recommended addition to the policy, but something we can come back to then as a group. Smart monitoring equipment. I'm sorry, the smart monitoring and the video surveillance. Video surveillance is being updated to make sure that we have both the audio and the video, and then also that we maintain that through the proper amount of time. The smart monitoring, I had a question on that myself. That would be the vape sensors that we would have in our bathrooms to detect if students are vaping in the bathrooms. Public records, the school district is set to approve the Wisconsin Records Retention Schedule. And essentially it says that we'll retain our records for no less than 7 years as prescribed by the statute. And school safety is in there so that it maintains compliance with the public records. It adds the retention of that to the retention schedule to that policy. Free and reduced price meals, 8531. It's being revised to update the language to ensure that it matches the USDA requirements for non-discrimination language. As a federally funded program, we have to have the non-discrimination statement in it to remain in compliance with what the USDA tells us we need to do. 8913, this is a combination policy, consolidation of 16, 23, 31, 34, and 41, 23. We're pulling those together, putting it in the 8,000 sections for ease of the use of the community as well as our administrators. It also replaces some restrictive timelines while noted that the investigations will be done as efficiently as practicable. Sometimes we get complaints of this and people aren't available. Winter breaks come into play, spring breaks come into play, so on and so forth. So we just want to make sure that we are responding to a complaint as soon as we can, but sometimes making sure that we obviously have time to investigate properly and thoroughly. And then 9700 relations with non-school affiliated groups and advertising and commercial activities. These policies provide guidance on the appropriate and inappropriate use of advertising or promotion of commercial products or services to the students and parents in the school. So I know that that is a long list. A handful of these policies are timely in nature. We talked about the pupil non-discrimination self-assessment that is going on right now. That plus the need to clearly articulate Rachel as our Title IX and Rachel and Ben as our compliance officers in the other areas are driving those policy changes. We have the need to get the elections one done prior to December when candidates for the school board will start to submit their papers and where current board members would start to, again, submit papers or possibly declare that they're not going to run. And then we have the open enrollment policies then that will affect us in January. So some timeliness on a number of these. The nice thing is by the end of the month, if we approve all of these or process all of these this month, we then will be done with policy for a little while and have a fair break.
I'd like to talk about Garrity. So didn't sit right with me saying people couldn't self-incriminate.
What number?
What What policy was that, the Garrity policy?
The Garrity one,
It was discipline.
yep, it's the staff discipline policy. Policy 3139, 4139, and it's that handout that I gave you, which would be a sample Garrity warning.
Just like the little time I did research it, the only thing I could find was the Supreme Court ruling, and it is the case called the Uniform Sanitation Men Association. What is it? Uniform Sanitation Men Association versus the Commission of Sanitation, May 1st, 1968. And they ruled that public employees cannot be fired for not self-incriminating. So I guess we'll have to ask our attorneys, like,
Our attorney is the one that drafted that letter for you.
okay.
So that's a common practice in that letter that you have there. That template is a common practice in HR-related issues. Should a issue of employment also be tied to something that could be perceived as criminal? Our ability to investigate and make a decision tied to what concurring law enforcement investigation would be in place.
Can he show us like where that has been overturned?
The letter that you have, I mean, this has been the statutory reference in that letter. I believe it's not in the statute there, but this is what the Garrity warning is. I mean,
I think Garrity was decided in 1967, and I think this was 1968. So I was just wondering if there is any statute or if there's the Supreme Court overruled this anywhere.
I don't believe the Supreme Court has revisited the 67 or 68 decision, but the Garrity warning and the Garrity rule has been in place in my 14 years as an administrator. It's been used in all of those school districts when investigating, again, something that would be considered possibly criminal in nature, but also a violation of employment. An example of that might be somebody who is, for instance, and this is not a local example, this is just made up, contrived in my mind, so I don't want anybody to say this is happening, but there may be cases where staff have broken into the medicine cabinets that exist in health rooms where students' prescriptions are held, and those medications have been stolen, sold on the streets, whatever it might be. The district has an obligation to address that employee in a timely manner from an employment standpoint. The police have a responsibility to investigate that from a criminal standpoint. And what we are able to do is issue the Garrity warnings such that we can conclude our investigation and then tell the employee that this isn't criminal in nature, this is 100% related to your employment, and that the police still have their job to do as far as any sort of criminal investigation. I mean, otherwise, absent that, we're putting people on paid leaves of indeterminate time or unpaid with the responsibility then to pay them back. This allows us to act quickly, efficiently with our employees when dealing with misconduct without tying it to the criminal nature of whatever they might be facing.
So I looked up a couple, I didn't know if we were gonna get a sample or not, so I looked up a couple samples. And in some of these other samples, it does say it is a voluntary interview and they do not have to answer questions. However, if they don't, although they cannot be terminated because they refuse to answer questions, if they do refuse to answer questions, that could be looked at in all of the facts surrounding the case as their silence being a determining factor in termination. So you can't straight up say, we're gonna fire you because you're not gonna talk to us, but at the same time, if they choose to remain silent and there are other facts around the case, you can use their silence as a determining factor, not the determining factor. I guess my concern is, I'm finding some that say this is a voluntary interview, and this is saying this is not voluntary. We're compelling you to give us this information.
Well, in the third paragraph of this letter, it says you have an obligation to truthfully answer the questions I ask of you. If you admit, represent, or falsely identify any information which you provide during this interview, you could be disciplined for misconduct. If you refuse to answer a question, you could be disciplined for insubordination. Further, if you fail to answer any of the questions I asked of you during the investigation, the district may draw an adverse inference regarding your conduct from your silence. So it does, in the third paragraph, incorporate what you had just mentioned.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that we are not telling people that they are required. I mean, they can be silent.
They can be silent.
Okay.
And that paragraph says if you're silent,
Okay.
It could have an adverse
Right,
impact on
and
our
I'm
investigation.
okay with that. I don't think that we should ever compel anybody to give us the information that we want. I mean, yes, we want it and we need it for our investigation. However, people do have a right to not self-incriminate. My
Sure.
other question is, it says that this will not be given to law enforcement unless ordered by court. What if this is a mandatory report situation? So now we're compelling them to give us this information, but then we're mandatory reporters. Are we then required to turn around and turn that information over to the police?
We are required to report any knowledge of abuse and neglect. And if we have a belief that, the training for abuse and neglect requires us to have firsthand knowledge. So our report to CPS, if it came secondhand, thirdhand, would essentially be, this is what we were informed of, but we don't have firsthand knowledge, and it would be CPS's requirement. And I've made that call dozens of times in my career where it came to me secondhand or thirdhand, not necessarily firsthand because I didn't have it reported directly to me. But we are obligated to report any
Right,
known issues of abuse and neglect.
okay.
Or I should say suspected issues of abuse and neglect. We don't know for sure.
So if you're at the point where you're conducting this interview, would that report have already been made, potentially, as a suspected?
If it's suspected, it's the expectation that it has been made. If we uncover that it hasn't been made, we would be obliged to make that call ourselves.
Any other questions? I do have another question about, it says about hugging students. That's a tough call for me.
What's the policy?
Are you on
I-
the same one?
Yeah, I believe it's still discipline. I didn't write it down, I apologize, I just wrote it down. I just saw the hugging students,
4139 staff discipline?
I think so. That's just tough for me, because you go to elementary school and you see so many little kids that love their teachers and they hug each other, and I'd hate to take that away.
Yeah, could you point that out to me? I was going through a lot of them there, which,
I'll have to get back to you. I
okay.
don't recall which policy it was in. And it was also, right underneath it was accepting gifts from students.
Yeah, gifts are, it's important to note that gifts are defined as something that's $25 or less. So it'd be gifts of value. So if a student brought a teacher a coffee mug, an apple, that's not hitting that 25 or more dollar
Got it.
threshold. It's the same rule that applies to us here in this room as administrators or board members.
Okay. I'll get back to you on which one that is.
Okay.
Oh, Jake?
Just a general question. So compliance officers in a lot of these, they have to be referenced by name and contact information versus
Correct.
title?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, the general is if you're calling the district office, it should be, I need to call Rachel, and Rachel's name and contact have to be there. You can't even call in a general line is kind of how this has been interpreted.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question about 5530, the student use or possession of intoxicants, drugs, or paraphernalia. I guess I'm looking for the rationale as to why essential oils or oil-like products are added in there.
You don't always know what's in the oil-like products, and they also have an impact on the others around them. I mean, they could be, the odor from them could trigger things in other students. I did talk to one of the board members today about that, and I mean, this isn't a live or die type recommendation. It is just a recommendation based off of kind of the current environment of what schools are dealing with. The real important addition to this one is item B, all the derivatives of hemp except CBD permitted by the school. So that would be what we're facing on a day-to-day basis, and that's what we would need included in the policy. Essential oils could be struck if that's what the board would like to do next week or 2 weeks.
Well, it just doesn't seem to fit the category of possession of intoxicants, drugs, paraphernalia. We're talking about illegal substances, steroids here. I mean, if we're talking about odors that affect other people in the building, that list could be much longer.
It could be. And middle schools would generally be the biggest offenders of that.
Body spray, I mean, super strong perfumes, hairspray, yeah.
Shower in a bottle, it doesn't work.
Correct.
It does.
Excessive dry shampoo. So that would be something I would be looking for, is that being crossed out.
Erica, what is the definition of essential oil?
It is the essence of the internal parts of a plant. It's DNA. Which
That's
we
I thought.
share a vast majority of DNA with them, just saying.
So if we're talking an essential oil that contains hemp, then I think it makes sense. I think that it's great to include that. However, if, you know, little Sally can't walk around with her bottle of lavender, which I think lavender smells like feet and it's disgusting, but other people really love it, I don't have a problem with that.
Yep, which is why it's not, this isn't one to die on, it was just part of the recommendations this time around.
Put lemon in my water.
But that's the
I put
thing,
lemon in my
the
water.
essential oils are in a ton of products as well.
They are.
Yep.
They're in a lot of things already.
Yeah.
So
Lotions, like
lotions,
you-
shampoos, conditioners. Yeah.
So that's where I just got a little concerned, what constitutes an essential oil? Anything that contains it, just an oil? I think it's things we need to think about.
Lavender smells like feet?
I think it does.
We should just.
need to find your
should
different
deny that right
lavenders
off the
and
bat
all-
here.
and
Okay,
all create
moving on.
Any other questions on policy?
Okay. So we'll have these back for approval on the 27th. If there's any questions, obviously, between now and then, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Personnel topics, we don't have any student learning topics.
So Jim Darren is joining us this evening in response to some of the data that we're seeing at Mukwonago High School. We pursued last spring and then into this fall, looking at our high school schedule, aware of the fact that since the schedule has been put into place, we have seen a decline in academic data at the high school. And while I want to say very clearly that it is not the schedule alone that is leading to decreased data at the high school, I'm 100% sure of that. It is a factor. I believe in, many of us believe in the decline that's happened since we put it into place. And so we do have a committee that has been looking at adding minutes or a touch point a week back into the schedule. And Jim is here today to give you an update. We are not ready to make a recommendation yet, but he's going to give an update on where we're at with the hopes that we can make a recommendation to the board for sure by January to move forward with.
Thanks for having me back, everybody.
No problem.
So just an overview on our committee work. Our goal is really to come to a consensus on a new schedule that would be better fit for the academic needs of our students and the staff that we have entrusted this. It's led by me and Stephanie and the MHS administrative team, and our committee members are really our school leadership team, which includes staff from all of our departments. We did start these discussions back in the spring when we noticed our data was not trending in the right direction. We started having some discussions on were there elements that we could change for our current school year, and really due to the inflexibility of our current schedule, we couldn't incorporate anything right now, but we have had those discussions since the spring. And since the school year started, you can see some of the things that we have gone through. Our committee meets every 2 weeks, and so right now we investigated different bell schedules, which I'll talk about. We identified 3 that right now we believe can meet the needs of our students. Hopefully we will get down to 1 schedule that a consensus builds that it is the best schedule for us. Hopefully in December and early January, we are doing some site visits to talk to some staff about actually working in the schedule and what works for them and what may have some cons to the schedule. With our criteria, as we talked about a criteria for a new schedule, we did not talk about having an early release component. I'll talk a little bit more about that. As Stephanie said, we needed to have an increase in overall instructional minutes and or an increase in touch points. Right now, the touch points per week are 3 times per week, which is probably fine for some of our classes. I've heard from math and world language specifically that meeting more times than just 3 times a week probably is better for them. We know that we needed to reduce the current time that we have for flex and advisory, and I'm going to talk about flex and advisory in similar terms. I'm not differentiating between a flex period or an advisory period, just a period of some sort. The committee said that they wanted to keep the option of our students taking 8 classes and not reducing it to 7. And then maybe the most important thing is it had to be simple and flexible. That right now we are so tied to our current schedule that any changes means that some classes are not meeting, some classes on short weeks are meeting more than other classes. And so it had to be flexible that we could easily accommodate, such as next week when we only are meeting twice throughout that week of Thanksgiving. These are the districts that we looked at. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but these are some of the most high-achieving districts across southeast Wisconsin, and these are the bell schedules that we kind of look through to see if there was something that would work for us. We maybe it's a bad word choice where we settled, but these are what the committee came up with as the top 3 schedules that can work for us. A straight block schedule, which is run by Elmbrook and KM and others, an AB block schedule run by Sussex, Franklin, Menominee Falls, and then a modified or a drop 2 schedule, which the current high schools in Waukesha run. Just a few things on each. The straight block schedule, students only take 4 classes or up to 4 classes at one time. However, those classes are longer, typically 80 to 90 minutes. The classes are in an accelerated format. Things that we would talk about, semester classes, like in our current schedule or traditional schedule, they finish in a quarter, and what we think of as year-long classes finish in a semester. One of the issues, and again, none of the issues that I may bring up with schedules are deal breakers. I mean, very, very high achieving districts have these schedules and they figure out how to do it. But one of the things with a straight block schedule is that we have to create these skinnies. We have to cut these 90-minute classes in half in order to accommodate some classes, the biggest ones being the music classes, because we can't just have music for half a year. Those have to run all year long. So we create these skinnies where maybe orchestra runs the first half of the skinny, and it's got to run up against another class, typically a required class, because those are the easiest to find sections for. The other, big thing that staff have some concerns about, this is the most radically different schedule compared to the one we currently have. The good thing is that, and I had to, I couldn't cut it down to how much more minutes each one has, like per week. I'd had to do it per semester because of the way the straight block, but approximate increase in 270 minutes per semester per class of instructional time. AB block is very, very similar to what Parkview runs right now. It is a very similar bell schedule to a straight block. However, kids sign up for their traditional 8 classes, and then they go to 4 of them on A days and a different 4 on B days. All the classes would still finish in what we would consider that 1 or 2 semester format, or a semester or a year-long format. We would not have to create a totally different schedule for our music classes. And again, it gives us about the same amount of increase in instructional minutes per semester. And then I put some links in here just to give you an idea of what the schools run. Some of these are straight block schedules or AB block schedules, but the biggest thing is the time is the same. It just is, are they only taking 4 classes at one time, or are they taking 8 classes at one time? So, so you've got some examples there of those schools. The drop 2 schedules, again, students would sign up for 8 classes. All of the classes meet on Monday, and so we'd have an 8-period day, probably about 45-minute classes. And then Tuesday through Friday in a traditional week, you would drop 2 different classes each day. And this is, although it's very similar to the current schedule that we have, we could, it is much more flexible than the current schedule that we do have. With this schedule, it increases our touch points to from 3 per week to 4 per week for every class. And then you see it is approximately 210 minutes per semester increase in instructional time. So those are the 3 options that we have, and then gave you an example of the Waukesha schedule, which is linked in there. Of course, we've got to examine the flex and advisory question. We knew when we started that we had to cut down the minutes, and so that has been a point of all of our discussions, knowing that we were not going to have 5 days of time set aside outside of instruction. We did survey our students not only on just how, and it was a very simple survey. But you can see the results of our student survey. We only did grades 10 through 12 because we gave the survey out in mid-October-ish, and our freshman kids only had about 6 weeks of time in our current schedule. They probably could not make a really good judgment on if their needs were being met quite yet with our current schedule. And then we did staff survey in the spring, and so you see those results there. You know, the biggest thing is whatever schedule that we came up with, it had to work where if we did include some sort of flex time, maybe twice a week, that the schedule can accommodate that without any issues. If we had 0 flex time, it could accommodate that as well. So that's why I talk about kind of the simple and flexible to it. Some additional thoughts. I wish there was data that fully supported one schedule over another, that it was clear that this schedule provided higher achievement, but there is no data. It's all what you do in that time and how many times a week that you have it. Every schedule that you look at has pros and cons. If we look at the longer block schedules that meet maybe every other day, you know, that is probably good for some of our hands-on classes. Art and tech ed might not be good for our academic areas, math, world language, English. So every schedule has pros and cons. And as Stephanie said, the new schedule is only part of the steps that we are taking this year. You all know about our guaranteed and viable curriculum goals, our ties into ACT, our ACT prep, getting more rigor in our curriculum 9 through 12. Those are just as important, if not more important, than what kind of schedule we come up with. When we did this 6 or 7 years ago, as we started these discussions in springs, we've realized we probably did not put our staff and students in the best position when we adopted our current schedule. We made so many changes. We changed how we delivered our special ed programming. We increased electives by a number I've never seen before, and probably did not have a lot of oversight in terms of rigor. And then we gave them the 1-2 punch of not only less instructional time, but fewer touch points. And I think as we evaluated where our schedule is, we have certainly seen that was not probably the best way to adopt a new schedule with all of that. So our next steps is to gather some more opinions of our staff, students, and the board. As I said, possible site visits to area schools to talk with those people that work in these schedules every day. We certainly need some direction on early release and flex. And then, as Stephanie said, hoping for a board recommendation in January. So that's where we stand.
Any questions? Jerry?
So when would you like us to put our input in? Is this just informational, or are you?
Any input you want to give me right now would be more than welcome.
So my question is, obviously, we've heard from students in the past, and we've talked about this for a long time, but for some students, one thing works, and for other students, other things work. So I guess my comment is when, like you said, the last time we switched up so many things. Maybe a gradual switch would be a, like a tiered switch if we have to do that, and that we are sure that we are taking all of our students into consideration and not just our scores and our those kinds of things, but the different learning styles when we start changing things. I guess that's off the top of my head, the first thoughts.
Greg? Mr. Darren, did we not make some of these changes because of our trade classes? We wanted to get more trade classes involved?
We did, and I am not criticizing that at all. I mean,
No,
we have,
yeah, that's part of the equation.
That was part of it, and
Yep.
as we looked at, that was probably the #1 reason that we wanted to go to 8 periods back in the day, is because we simply did not have enough periods for our kids to experiment in any. If you look at the required classes in a 7-period day for freshmen, 6 out of those 7 are pretty much called for. It did not give them any flexibility in what they wanted to take.
And our trades classes have been pretty outstanding,
Booming.
no doubt.
Booming. Yep.
So how do
And
you make that? Yeah.
We've got to figure out a way to do both. We do not want to limit the opportunities our kids are getting right now. We just know that we have got to increase the overall achievement that our kids are walking out of Mukwonago High School with.
Craig, I guess I'd say 2 things to that too. Number one, it's one of the reasons why the staff felt pretty strongly about maintaining whatever we go to, 8 choices within the schedule is because of that. But the other thing I think I would say is I think somewhere along the line there was a miscommunication about the fact that we could have one or another as a district, that if we were going to have a really, really strong CTE program and strong electives, that meant that we would accept lower test scores as a district. And I would say that does not have to be the case, that we need to change that narrative no matter what schedule we end up with, and that is that we can do both and we can do both well, that it is possible in a high school to have a very robust elective offering and have high test scores. And that's what we want to strive to do as this district.
Who does that best in our area?
We use a lot as a comparison Mukwonago, who has a ACT score of higher than a 22 composite score, and they have an incredibly strong elective offering in CTE classes. So that's, we talk a lot about the work that Mukwonago has done.
Thank you. Crosby?
I'm just curious, I mean, drawing back from my own experience, we had 8 class periods a day, a homeroom every day. I went to a Lutheran school, so we had chapel every day. Why are we deviating from that? Like, what is the reasoning for getting away from 8 class periods in a day? What are we benefiting, or, because every school seems to be doing this, and I don't understand why.
So again, all 3 schedules that we're still considering are based on the 8 periods. As far as why we veered towards doing just an 8-period day, it is because 45 minutes, 8 classes, 45 minutes apiece, all day, every day, makes it very difficult to do some of the things that we have grown to do well. Makes it very hard in a culinary class to go through and get everything done, or in a woods class. Even an art class or a music class, it would be preferred that we have the longer class periods. Our AP science classes would prefer longer class periods. And so I think, in the case of the schedules that we're currently looking at, that it maintains that 8-period, but does provide better flexibility, I would say, for the academic areas to continue to grow too.
Do we find that those are long class periods? I mean, teenagers' attention spans are not great, so a very long class period just seems counterproductive to me. Like, yeah, you're getting the minutes, but are they productive minutes?
Again, I think Is this working still?
Yeah.
There we go. I think it is really about looking the way that we are delivering instruction within that model that makes it successful or not successful. I'm going to be very honest, when we went to this schedule, I think where we probably dropped the ball as a district is that there wasn't time for our teachers to intentionally plan moving to that schedule. So we took everything that we were trying to do within 7-period day consistently, and now we just tried to take those units and move them to this schedule. Whatever we move to, we will plan time this spring to very intentionally take a look at our classes and plan for what that looks like in this new environment. So I believe longer class periods can be super successful for high school students. It's what we do with that time and what's happening with instruction. If we're trying to just take 2 lessons and shove them together into one, that's not a good model and isn't going to work well. We would need to have some discussions about what that looks like.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No, well,
Jake?
With a block schedule, how do you coordinate like lunches and things like that when you have, if there's 4 classes, 2 and 2, we have multiple lunches?
Yeah,
How do you make that work?
You end up making one of the blocks longer. So typically, instead of a 90-minute class, I think it's about 2 hours, and it's very similar to what we do today. So you'd have 3 lunches. You'd have one set of classes that go to lunch first, and then go to class for the block of time. Another class would probably have skinnies, where you go for 45 minutes, then you go for lunch, then you go back to class, and then the other one would go all class first, and then have the last lunch.
So you'll break some of the blocks?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Carolyn?
we had this schedule at Union Grove High School where I taught, and it was, as a teacher, I loved it. High school science teacher, especially because we could actually get labs done, and it was fabulous. And for like all of the AP teachers, they were huge fans of this just because they had that extra time. But like you had said, we prepped for those classes, so we broke up the monotony of we weren't reading about the moon for, you know, that one 90-minute class. We just did a lot of different things, and it was super fun. Question about, you said we were going to be removing early release. Could you talk about that?
I just, I didn't say we're going to be removing it. I just said that whatever schedule that we have, it's got to work with early release or without. And so that's where the flexibility thing comes in. So if whatever, so right now our current schedule is based on an early release schedule. If we got rid of early release, we could not go forward with the current schedule that we have. We'd have to modify it in some way, shape, or form. So when we got our staff together and started talking about whatever bell schedule, whatever schedule we came up with, it had to work with or without flex time. It had to work with or without early release time. Yeah.
So Carolyn, we'll be coming forward with the actual school calendar for next year with some recommendations at the committee of the whole in December. We'll be talking about the days off, the professional development days. Early release will be built into that discussion for the board.
Perfect.
Jerry, did you have anything else?
No.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
New class proposal.
Yeah, so this year we only are coming forth with one new course proposal that would be at our high school. You can take that off of there, Tom, thanks. That would be at our high school, and that is the second layer of the Leader's Mindset course that was implemented this year. We currently have in the Leader's Mindset 192 students, and that was with turning students away because of the cap in the classes. So we are running technically 8 sections, but they're semester sections. So Rick has four class periods during the semester of a Leader's Mindset. And he is put forth a proposal to do the Leadership 2 class, which is a semester class for only seniors who have taken a leader's mindset. A leader's mindset is very much an individual, how students can be more successful. And Leadership 2 really brings it to the larger picture and talks much more about leadership within a school building and adding to that. And then also having a component that works with the middle school. So that is going, and the community. So it is going more out in that direction. So only a senior year class for a semester. Not asking for.
I got to sit in on that class for a little while doing a tour, and Mr. Whitty asked me to sit down at the table with the students, and it was phenomenal. Their feedback was this was their favorite class, how he made them think, and how they're becoming better leaders themselves. It was a great conversation with the students. So, all in favor for part 2.
Yeah, how do you go wrong with
Right.
that leadership? Yep.
Okay, so we'll bring that forth at the end of the month then for actual approval. And then last thing for student learning is I had been asked by a board member to please bring forth dropping enrollment courses at the high school. And so I put in there a table that has courses that are showing inconsistent or dropping enrollment. Obviously, there is a story for each of those classes. For instance, in science, you'll see foundations, physics, and chem. That is a class actually we'd like to see shrinking numbers in because we would like more of our students to just simply take a year of chemistry and not the foundations course. So in that way, we see that as a good thing that those classes are dropping. The physical education classes, the 3 listed, are the 3 that are listed. I believe the reason that we're seeing a decline in those is because we're seeing an increase in weights and advanced weights over that same period of time. So again, there are stories there. So I bring this forth, and if you have any questions, more than happy to answer them for you.
When we're restructuring the high school for next year, are we going to take these into account?
We are. So for instance, our computer science courses, we are taking a look at putting in the course guide classes that have low enrollment, that we've seen it kind of decline and stay that way, potentially offering those classes on an every other year basis. So within a junior, senior year, students would have the opportunity to take those classes, but we're being more thoughtful and intentional on when they're offered to help with staffing and to make sure that we have the numbers in there when the classes actually do run. So if they'd normally run at 12 students, offering every other year, they might have 20, 24 students in it, and that makes more sense to run those courses with that. So we're trying to be more intentional about those classes.
Okay. Game design is going down, really? Amazing.
Yes.
Okay, very good then. That blows me away.
Jerry?
So with the computer science ones, are any of those part of the academies?
So all of those courses are courses that are offered in our IT academy at this point. We are seeing a decline in enrollment in our IT academy by pretty large numbers. And so we've been having conversations just in general about that. We have asked Danny Marzal and Jay Krieger, who are helping to run our IT academy, or are 2 of our computer science teachers, to take a look at the IT academy and these classes and to make sure that we still have a path to a student graduating with the academy background in the classes they need to take, and in a way that if these classes only run on an every other year basis, that we're still okay for those students.
Well, with the academy, are some of the things in the field changing that we need to adjust what we offer for our academy? I mean, the academy is our oldest academy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know there's certifications and things now that weren't there or are more needed or less needed.
I think what we see from a decline in the academy potentially is as complicated and as simple as more choice since when the academy first was developed. And so as we see an increase in AMP, our Academy for Medical Professionals, we definitely have seen a decrease. Like there's only so many ways you can spread things at the high school. And so the need is still there for the academy, the IT academy, but yeah, we've seen a decline as we've seen an increase in AMP, and our AMP numbers are through the roof.
But just when you talk to those individuals who are overseeing that, if it requires eliminating game design and putting in a different something, I'm just, have we evaluated and
Yes.
analyzed what we're offering?
I get what you're saying. Yes. Yeah, we are having those discussions.
Only so many kids.
Any other questions?
Gotta be worth it.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Moving on to student service topics.
All right, so I have Kristen Roberts here tonight. She is our social worker at SOAR. And then also, if you recall, earlier this year, I spoke about having a part-time AODA coordinator. And so Kristen has taken on that role for us. So she, as promised, will be here 3 more times this year to give an update and just to look at the impact that that role is having. It is a 1-year limited term role, and we're going to continue to monitor how this position is going and continually look at its impact for students. So she's here tonight. Be kind to her.
Welcome.
The clicker's
Hi,
right
Kristen.
there.
Oh, I can use a clicker. Awesome.
You can.
Okay.
You have to
So-
talk into the
oh,
mic.
sorry. Just to provide an overview of what I'll be going over tonight with Christine. So first, we're just going to take a look at a systems approach and identify what we currently have in place at Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. Then we'll take a look at some secondary data that we pulled from 2020 to this school year. We'll provide an overview of the interventions that I am working on, and then I'll show you a snapshot of the intervention dashboard that I'm using to track the data. And then lastly, just let you know what are some things that have been accomplished already this school year when we look at AODA concerns, some tasks that are in progress, and then future goals moving forward. Okay, so when I think about students who have AODA concerns and just students in general, I think it's really important to look at a tiered approach. So you'll notice on the bottom tier, in general, when we think about any topic really related to education, majority of students at 80 to 90%, that's our Tier 1. So at the Tier 1 level, we currently have our board policies, which we've talked about a little bit more tonight. Locker checks, access to support staff, so social workers, psychologists, counselors, just anybody in the school that a student feels safe with, advisory, the connectedness survey, the health curriculum, and then monthly parent newsletters that I am sending out. Then at Tier 2, so that's going to be about 5 to 15% of the population, and so those students might be a student who has a behavior contract. They might be receiving the intervention Prime for Life that I was trained in over the summer, the AODA Student Assistance Program, monthly student check-in. And then Tier 3, so roughly 1 to 5% of the secondary population, that would be SOAR, community referrals, abeyance agreements, support plans for re-entry to school, and weekly student check-in.
So district-wide, we took a look at our trends, and so this data was pulled about 2 to 3 weeks ago now, so it's a little bit old, and I know some of the numbers have already changed. But if you look from the 2021 in each category, you'll see that there has been an increase in every category. And so keeping in mind that obviously we're just at the start of 23-24. So in 22-23 was our highest for alcohol-related incidents or violations. Our drug-related incidents and violations increased pretty significantly during the 22-23, part of the rationale for creating this position. Tobacco-related has changed more into vape-related, so we had created a different category. So where you see the increase between 21-22 and 22-23, that appears to be going down, but our drug incidents have gone up, and that is because our the vapes that we have been consistently finding generally have THC in them, which would be the same as marijuana. So that's why I believe that's why that shift has occurred. And then when you're looking at the 23-24, again, just keep in mind that those numbers are only to date. And then just out of curiosity, I wanted to see, as I put in my newsletter, we've had a number of pre-expulsion meetings this school year. And so I wanted to look at our September, October data specifically just to see if we were on a different trend this year than we had been in years past, just to give a comparison. So if you look at the first tab, which is alcohol-related incidents, I would say, you know, we just pulled the 2021 to 22-23, not particularly significant for just, again, keeping in mind this is the first 2 months of school. And then when you start to look at drug-related incidents over the last 2 months, again, and you start to look at 23-24, we have currently had more incidents in the first 2 months of school than we have historically. And then I'm just gonna skip over to the vape-related violations, and right now we're about at the same trend as we have been the last couple of years. Again, though, keeping in mind that the vapes are just containing different things, which is why those numbers are continuing to flip-flop.
So Christine, these aren't incidents, these are students.
Correct.
All high school?
Correct.
So interventions, so in terms of student and family engagement, since I started my position, I've contacted 46 families, and I am currently providing services to students through the AODA Student Assistance Program to 18 secondary students. So these interventions include motivational interviewing, Prime for Life, and connection with resources. I know a big question is how do we know something is working? This is a new position, and I just think that it's important to recognize that we need to continue to look at progress over time and continue to use the tools that I have available to determine if substance use is decreasing and overall student well-being is improving, as well as reviewing grades and attendance for the students that I'm working with. Last year, Prime for Life, 31 students completed that class. And then this school year, that the number I think right now is roughly like maybe 14 or 15 students are currently in progress with Prime for Life. And then motivational interviewing, just to give you some background, this is an evidence-based and research-based method to address AODA concerns. During the motivational interviewing process, I talk with students about change, reasons to change. It's more of a collaborative approach with the students and working with them to kind of assess their own level or commitment to want to change. And then I would use this one-on-one with students. So just to provide an overview of the intervention dashboard that I'm using, you can see at the time I put this together, I had 18 students on my caseload. That's a breakdown of the year that they are in school. And then I also wanted to look at the number of referrals prior to me working with them. So you'll see that on the left-hand side. And then the dashboard itself will have the name of the intervention listed, the progress monitoring tool I'm using, the goal of the intervention. So whatever that student identified goal is that we developed together, I'd be looking to see if there's not been any change. If there's been some improvement, that would be in yellow. And then if they've met their identified goal, then that would be in green. Also looking at the number of AODA referrals post-vention, so hopefully that number would be 0. Attendance, this is a data-driven rule that comes from attendance work, so 80% or below would be considered in the red, 81 to 94% would be in yellow, and then 95% and above is green. And then in terms of grades, 2 or more failing classes would be red, 1 failing class would be yellow, and then if they're not failing any classes, that would be green. So what exactly does the dashboard look like? This is just a snapshot of the dashboard. Are there any questions?
I do have one question.
Yeah.
You're doing like the counseling with the students. How involved are the parents with that?
What do you mean to like?
Like when they're doing their
specify?
plans, like how to change?
Yeah, so I would say that is kind of a case-by-case basis and depends on the student and the parent need. Do you want to
So I think
add
some
on
of
to
our
that too?
so some of our students come from a variety of different backgrounds. So sometimes we have families that are super invested in change, and other times we just have different dynamics where it maybe doesn't look the way we would hope it would look. And so that's really where Kristen works on that ownership of a student to that commitment of change. And so I think that's a benefit to having that one-on-one support. Also, all parents are aware, Dale, that they're working with Kristen, if that's a question you had. So that is oftentimes part of our conversation when a student is found in violation.
Yeah, I was more curious of like how involved is like the parents, like as far as the plan to like help at home, because that's where they're gonna need a lot of help, obviously. So
Right. So Kristen does provide a lot of wraparound with families too.
perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, and then there's of course the information in the monthly newsletters that highlights specific information for parents to know, and then a resource spotlight, so where they can go to find more information.
Any other questions? Oh, Carolyn?
How long are they in the Prime for Life program with you, and when do they graduate, or what criteria would they have to meet in order to graduate out of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Prime for Life dictates the length of the intervention depending on what it's being used for. So Prime for Life is something that is used as both a preventative tool as well as an intervention tool. So it would really depend on if it is a student with prior concerns, or if it were be to deliver it as more of a preventative, like in a class. Right now at this time, it's being delivered for students that do have a policy violation. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, when do they get out of the program, or when would they get out of the program? Do they have to have, X amount of months of perfect attendance and successful grades, or when would they?
Oh, okay, yeah, so the number of sessions would be roughly like 8 to 10 hours of curriculum.
They also changed Prime for Life in the last year or two, added a 420 program. The original Prime for Life was based heavily on alcohol use, and they noticed in the last couple of years that they needed to make a change and update their programming also, and so they do have a THC component. So we're able to interchange some of that work back and forth, which has been a nice addition. Do you want to go to the next slide?
Sure. Okay, so this is our accomplishments in progress and future goals. So one of the places that we started was just identifying a caseload and contacting those students and families just to see how the year was starting off for them. I've done some of my own research, been in consultation with other staff, and just collaborated on best practice, what will meet the needs of our students and families. I created an informational sheet so that families were aware of what the program looks like. Then there's a brochure that kind of condenses that information, as well as a consent form. And then September and October and now November, some tips for families have been sent home in monthly newsletters at PVMS and MHS. And then I also collaborated with the Waukesha School District by attending the Suburban Milwaukee Regional Meeting. That was led by a community resource provider, as well as their social worker who is the AODA coordinator in the district. And then in progress, I will actually be attending a training tomorrow. It's called SBIRT, which, as you can see up there, stands for Screening, Brief Intervention, and Referral to Treatment. Advisory and homeroom, and then working on completing an AODA assessment tool. And then just future goals moving forward, just increasing our community partnerships, reviewing other evidence-based programming, having some family engagement nights, and then just updating our community resources on the district website.
In addition to that, at the end of the month, we'll bring back Care Solace to talk about, which will be another layer of support for our students and our families, which is a network of healthcare providers. And then I'm just gonna put a little plug in there for our next community engagement night. We will be bringing in Tom Farley, which is Chris Farley's brother, to come in and tell like their own personal story about what their family went through with Chris Farley's passing. And so I'm telling you guys, because I don't know that our students will know who Chris Farley is, but I know the adults in this room will. And so, but I think it'll be it's had a really good attendance in other areas around us. And so I'm hopeful that that name alone will draw in some families.
What's the date?
I'm still waiting on Brook Life to figure out what night. So it'll either be early December, like second week in December, or mid-January. Do you guys have any other questions?
No, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
And Dale, just to, when you asked about middle school or high school, to date, it has been high school. I can't recall the other numbers.
Okay.
The first 2 months of school. All right, then our last thing is actually from Stephanie and me. I apparently can't talk now. For the last 3 years, we've had ESSER funds that were used to pay for a total of 11 positions in the district. As we reported to the board before, the intent of these funds and positions were to help fill any academic gaps that occurred due to the disruption in learning from COVID. And so there are 3 positions that we are requesting to remain moving in the 24-25 school year. So the 2 positions I'm requesting are to have the continuation of 2 speech and language pathologist positions. We currently have 417 students who receive services in the district. If you look at the dashboard I put down below, you can kind of see how those students are spread out. If we were to eliminate the 2 positions, we would have to add an additional 81 students to the caseloads that are currently in place. And then in addition to that, we just recently had our child find, which is our legal obligation to the community to allow anybody in our community to bring forth a younger child if they have concerns. And so we had 24 people attend and a 50% referral rate for speech and language. So our numbers just continue to grow. So that would be my request.
Do you know the growth that has taken place in the last 3 years in terms of numbers? Was it 81? Is that the increase of speech?
I'm sure it's higher than that. I just know right now those 2 caseloads are absorbing 81, and we're still a half person short. So,
Any other questions?
Well, and then the third position actually is to continue the contract for the secondary math coach position. So if you remember, we brought in 3 math coaches in the district with the ESSER funds. Well, we feel like with Michelle's position being added and an instructional coach at our elementary schools, that we can absorb our math work that we're doing as a district. the secondary math coach started some work that, with our instructional coaches having 80 to 100 teachers that they're working with, and our math data, we'd like to continue the secondary position for that math coach.
So, Dale, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So the ESSER funds were a 3-year thing, and I'm sure this is gonna affect budget somehow. Do we have those numbers? Just, I mean,
We can fit this into the budget, Craig,
okay,
as we move forward into the, this is the last year, the federal funds being available,
right,
but we're positioned to do this.
okay.
And you two are not asking for just an additional year. You're just saying in general, permanently, these are things we believe long-term we need, want, could utilize.
Yes, until we would see our numbers changing, and potentially that position would no longer be needed.
Yep.
There was 9, we're only keeping 3.
There were 11, and
11.
we're
We're
requesting
only
keeping
keeping 3.
3.
That was it.
My question was similar, so the other positions, the other 9
Sherry, talk
positions.
to
Talking to Mike, please.
The other 3 positions you feel, the other 9 positions you feel will,
Yeah, the other 8 positions, I think it would be, we feel like the data did what it was supposed to through having those positions, and that we can absorb what was happening with those positions in our daily.
can you just overall say what those were?
Yeah, so the other positions were a psychologist, which actually is, the intent was always to make that a permanent position. We just used ESSER funds for the first couple of years while we could. A 5 interventionist positions that we brought into our elementary schools to basically follow the data after COVID and help out with any of those gaps that we saw, learning gaps we saw with math and reading, and then 2 math coach positions at the elementary level.
So those math coaches and those interventionists, you feel the teachers are able to compensate?
Yes, yeah. I mean, is it always nice to have positions? Yes, but obviously we need to also be aware of the financial implications in the district. And yes, I do believe that we are at a place where we can absorb the workload or what is happening with those positions. And obviously our principals have been involved in the conversation, and they're ready also at this point to help figure out those positions.
All right, thank you. Moving on to action items, hires, retirements, and resignations.
Good evening. I have 2 notices of retirement for approval tonight. The first is Anne Marie Capascio, and she has currently served as a mathematics teacher at Mukwonago High School. The second is Stacy O'Brien, and she served as an English teacher at Mukwonago High School. I'm very grateful for their service.
Are they staying through the end of the school year then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I make a motion that we approve these 2 retirements.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. Motion carries. All right, we are moving into executive session, Wisconsin Statute 19.85. We were going to discuss litigation, but our attorney is not feeling well, so we will just be discussing superintendent evaluation process.
I will make a motion